It's hard to believe. This is coming out of Russian state media. We wanted to saw the Western world into pieces, but he, Trump, decided to saw through it himself. Imagine that. Russian state media saying Trump is undermining the Western world, which was the dream of the Russians. He's doing it for the Russians. And it's not just in Ukraine or the tariffs. There are so many other ways in less than 2 months in which Trump has advanced the Putin agenda.
Hi, I'm Jo Crawford and welcome to Times Radio's Trump Report. Today I'm joined by Allan Lichtman, election forecaster and distinguished professor of history at the American University. Thank you for joining me on the Trump Report today.
My great pleasure.
So, breaking from the White House, Trump has threatened the EU that he will impose a 200% tariff on its alcohol unless they remove the US whiskey duties. I mean, what do you make of that news as it is?
It's absolutely head-spinning. Trump has targeted our closest allies, our most important partners for these vengeful tariffs, and he's constantly swiveling his head about it. First you see the tariffs, now you don't. And what does this create? Tremendous uncertainty within the United States that stymies business planning, that stymies investment. The stock market is plunging. Hardworking Americans are seeing their life savings melting away. Consumer confidence is in sharp decline, and forecasters are now turning very negative on the American economy. The only one benefiting from this, and I can talk about that at some length, is the guy who's smiling and laughing in Russia, the bloody dictator Vladimir Putin.
And we're expecting those talks today to be going on between US officials in Moscow. Trump said that this ceasefire, it would make sense for Russia, but also that there is a lot of downsides for Russia as well. And Trump says that he can do things financially to put pressure on Russia. But then on the other hand, we've heard from Russia saying that this 30-day temporary ceasefire deal that we're being presented with, it would give nothing to Russia. I mean, do we think that we will get a ceasefire deal out of this?
You know, when it comes to Trump, even for someone who's a forecaster like myself, when you make predictions about what Trump is going to do, you know, you wind up eating the ground glass of your crystal ball. Vladimir Putin is going to do whatever Vladimir Putin thinks will benefit himself and Russia. Understand, Vladimir Putin is not a friend of America, the UK, and democracies around the world. He is not a reliable partner. He has two basic objectives: to sow chaos, disorder, and pain in democratic nations, and to destroy their democratic institutions, and secondly, to restore as much of the old Soviet empire as he can, starting with Ukraine, but not limited to Ukraine.
Zelensky said that talks with the US, they were entirely constructive. Even just a few weeks ago, we had that extremely explosive meeting between Zelensky, Trump, JD Vance. I mean, do you think that's all in the past? Do you think that the Ukraine and the US are on track for stronger relations than, say, a few weeks ago?
Again, when you're dealing with Trump, who changes his mind every 10 minutes, it's very hard to say. But look, so far, the overwhelming thrust of Trump's policy has been to serve Putin's interest in Ukraine. First of all, he has trashed Zelensky, not just only in that contentious meeting when President Trump and Vice President Vance basically ambushed Zelensky, but he's called him a dictator. And by the way, he doesn't call the real dictator, Putin, a dictator. He calls Zelensky a dictator, even though Zelensky was democratically elected, unlike Putin, who hasn't had democratic elections in Russia for 20 years. And moreover, even Zelensky's political opposition have agreed, while Ukraine is fighting for its life against Russian aggression, who've committed horrible atrocities against Ukraine, they're not going to hold elections. Then Trump fabricates that Zelensky's approval rating is 4%, when the only reliable poll we have has his approval rating at 57%, 1,500% higher than Trump, fabricated. And then Trump astonishingly and falsely claims that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that started the war. And then most fundamentally, it looks like under Trump, there's not going to be Ukrainian participation in NATO or even any American security guarantees. He says he trusts Putin. When was the last time a major leader of one of the world's great democracies said, I trust a bloody dictator? That was at the infamous Munich conference, which you know well, in 1938, when the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain said he trusted Adolf Hitler, there would be peace in our time. The result, of course, was the Holocaust that murdered 6 million or more innocent Jews as well as others, and the worst war in the history of the world that claimed more than 60 million lives. It is the path to perdition to trust these bloody dictators.
I want to ask you about that, with that language that Trump was using about Zelensky and also what we're seeing with his actions towards Russia. Trump, he says that he's doing this because he's trying to be the middleman. He's not trying to come down hard on Russia, otherwise they won't come to him. They won't try and get that deal. That's what he's saying. How far would you go to say that, or if you agree or disagree with that theory?
I totally disagree. He is fundamentally altered the American security arrangements that have kept America and the wider democratic world safe, first from the Soviets and now from, at least until Trump too, the dictatorship of Vladimir Putin. He has taken Putin's side virtually in every way in Ukraine. Our allies in the UK and elsewhere are reeling in dismay, and the Russian state media is rejoicing. Here is Igor Nemushin, I'm not making that up, a reporter for the Russian state media, and he says, from Washington, it looks like he's given Russia all the cards and tools it needs to successfully continue the special military operation and directly achieve success on the battlefield. They're cheering in Moscow with respect to exactly what Trump is doing. Another host for Russian state media, Evgeny Popov, said that the U.S. has finally done Zelensky a real disservice. And he says, moreover, and this is critical, it's hard to believe, this is coming out of Russian state media, we wanted to saw the Western world into pieces, but he, Trump, decided to saw through it himself. Imagine that. Russian state media saying Trump is undermining the Western world, which was the dream of the Russians. He's doing it for the Russians. And it's not just in Ukraine or the tariffs. There are so many other ways in less than 2 months in which Trump has advanced the Putin agenda.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes, I will. So, not only, has he advanced the Putin agenda in Ukraine, but through his uncertain whipsaw tariff policies, he's undermining the American democracy. People are seeing their life savings melting away in the stock market. Consumer confidence is plummeting. Now, independent forecasters have turned sharply negative on the American economy, as have the American people. This is music to the ears of Vladimir Putin, who wants to cause pain and disruption and chaos in America and every democracy. Plus, Trump is advancing the Putin agenda of undermining democracy. He has said astonishingly, as president, I can do anything I want, emulating Putin. I'm saving the country, therefore I am not subject to any laws. He's even called himself a king. He's issued a multitude of executive orders that the courts have found, including conservative courts, not just, as he said, renegade liberals, have found violate the Constitution, violate the laws of the land. He's threatened judges. He's empowered Elon Musk, who was never appointed by the president, never approved by the Senate, to run roughshod to hollow out our bureaucracy, undermining democracy, exactly what Putin wants. But it doesn't stop there. He has also dismantled American foreign aid programs that for 60 some odd years, with solid bipartisan support, have saved or improved the lives for tens of millions of people abroad. So when America moves out of the world, guess who moves in? Russia, attaining enormous status and prestige in the world. Doesn't stop there. He's undermined America's medical and scientific research. He's attacked and undermined higher education in America. Again, music to Putin's ears. This gives Russia a huge leg up in competition in science and technology, which in the modern world undergirds all of our national security. He has dismantled the part of the FBI designed to prevent foreign meddling in American elections, opening the door for Russia to intervene and attempt to meddle in American elections. He's undermined our capacity to resist Russian cyber attacks. Again, this is like half a dozen or more, and I could go on, examples where in less than 2 months, Trump has ticked off the Putin agenda. I'll give you another quotation from another state media spokesperson, Dmitry Kisilov, on the top-rated news show in Russian state media. He says, "If we simplify it, everything now is decided by the great troika, Russia, China, and US, that will form the new structure of the world. The European Union as a single political force no longer exists." Think how chilling that is. What he's basically saying is Trump is making the US the third authoritarian nation, along with the authoritarians in Russia and China, and together they are going to carve up the world in the interests of the authoritarians in these nations. I can't imagine anything more chilling coming out of the Russian state media.
If I pick you up on that point, Alan,
Absolutely.
Trump, he says that he wants to cut aid to Ukraine. A big part of that is to try and divert the US's attention to the threat of China. I mean, how far along can we go along with that idea that Trump sees this union of Russia, China, and the US in some way? If Trump,
There are some pretty clear explanations of why Trump is kowtowing to Putin in a way we've never seen before. I was about to quote
But
from...
we also did see, Trump, he has imposed tariffs onto China as well. So again, I struggle with that line.
I do struggle with that as well. We don't see the same cozy relationship with China, and I think there are reasons for it. It's in my book, The Case for Impeachment, that I wrote way back in 2017. Ever since the very early 21st century, for over 20 years, Trump's overwhelming dream has been to build the ultimate Trump Tower. Guess where? In Moscow. He hasn't been able to realize that dream yet, but he keeps pursuing it. He even pursued it during the 2016 campaign, although, he wouldn't admit it. So with Trump, it's always follow the money. That's always a very important element of what Trump wants. And I think he's still pursuing this dream of this ultimate Trump Tower in Moscow. Secondly, he wants to beat Putin. He's made this crystal clear. He doesn't want to be subject to the 22nd Amendment that limits him to 2 terms. Like Putin, he wants to be president for life. Like Putin, he doesn't want to be constrained by the courts or a pesky Congress. He wants to rule as a unitary executive. And so I think, leaving aside the conspiracy theories, there are simple explanations as to why Trump is kowtowing to Putin, but not necessarily to China. Although that remains to be seen, what the ultimate outcome of his China policy is going to be. Is he going to continue American guarantees to the defense of Taiwan, for example?
I want to turn to Elon Musk now, because I think an interesting point, especially with these US tariffs, is how it's going to impact Musk's own companies itself. I mean, we've seen that Tesla stocks, it's lost half its value in 3 months. But then on the other hand, it's suggested that maybe Tesla may benefit from these tariffs from Trump because it's produces its cars within the US, and so that won't be impacted by the tariffs, unlike its competitors, for example. But then we know historically Trump's views on electric vehicles, but then now he's bought a Tesla, has he not? So, I mean, what's going on there?
Again, it's head spinning. It's hard to find a rationale. I think, Trump and Musk, and I'm not an expert on this, I'm not an economist, so I am a political historian and political analyst, so I can analyze the politics, the economics. I think even the experts, as you say, aren't sure exactly what the impact is going to be. But I do think, obviously they believe in the long run it's going to be beneficial. And then we've seen, I run out of words when I talk about the astonishing thing Trump does. Can you imagine an American president essentially becoming a used car salesman or a new car salesman, turning, the presidency into hawking Teslas? Who can imagine that? It wasn't all that long ago that Republicans were up in arms because Barack Obama was wearing a brown suit, not a blue suit, which they thought was not presidential. And here is now the president using the presidency, the backdrop of the presidency, to sell damn cars. Can you imagine that? If a Democratic president had done that, Republicans would say it's the end of Western civilization as we know it.
It's quite an image, you seeing those pictures of Trump and Musk in that Tesla. I guess.
Let me say one more thing about Musk.
Of course, yeah.
There is something in the U.S. Constitution called the Appointments Clause, and it establishes 2 categories of those with official federal power, federal officers who can actually do things on behalf of the federal government. One are superior officers who have to be appointed by the president and approved by the Senate, with a minor exception for certain interim appointments. He has not been appointed by the president to a department or agency, and he certainly hasn't been approved by the Senate. Then there are inferior officers, but those offices have to be explicitly established by an act of Congress. There is no act of Congress establishing an office for Musk. And as a number of courts now have indicated, what Musk is doing violates the impeachment clause of the Constitution, is illegal, is unconstitutional. They've tried to say, oh, he's not really doing it. Some other obscure official is really behind it. A subterfuge that if you believe that, I have a big bridge in my hometown of Brooklyn, I'd be happy to sell you. Obviously, Musk is exercising unprecedented power and authority in direct violation of the U.S. Constitution.
And we do have a few rulings to come on that, don't we? But I mean, if we look at the polling on Musk reputationally, he has taken a hit reputationally with American citizens, by making these federal cuts with Doge. Also, on the other hand as well, Tesla is having its stock, it's halving in value. I mean, how long do you think that Musk is going to keep putting up with that happening to him, keep going along with that line with Trump? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's paying off at the moment, does it?
It doesn't seem like it's paying off economically, but I do think in the long run, Musk does believe, that this problem is a blip and that he will benefit, if nothing else, from, receiving lots of lucrative government contracts. Let's not forget, he built his business with a lot of support from the government that he is now so callously trashing. Aside from all of the other problems, the undermining of the American economy, American democracy, playing into the hands of Putin, something that hasn't been stressed enough is how cruel and inhumane what Musk and Trump are doing. Firing federal employees for no good reason. Employees who have, nothing negative on their record or very positive employment evaluations. Think of the human cost. These are people who are now struggling to pay their medical bills. People who have, kids with disabilities and medical problems who are now suffering. People struggling to feed their kids, to pay their rent, to pay their mortgages. There seems to be absolutely no concern, no human empathy on the part of either Trump or Musk for either one of them. In fact, they seem to think empathy or sympathy is not a virtue but a vice, that undermines hard policy. And by the way, firing federal employees will not make a dent in the federal budget, and it hasn't. First of all, only 6.6% of the federal budget is employment. That's not the way you cut the budget, by firing people. Secondly, you fire people, they're not spending money in their communities, they're not paying taxes, they're going on unemployment compensation, draining resources from the government. You fire people from the IRS and you forfeit many billions of dollars in foregone taxes. So you're really not saving anything at all with all of these mass firings, but you're doing two things: terrorizing the civil service and hollowing out things that Musk and Trump don't like civil rights and education and foreign aid. But you're not saving any of the federal budget. And that's, a huge, fabrication that Trump and Musk are trying to sell to the American people.
How long do you think that's going to work for Trump, though? If, for example, when we said with the polling earlier, reputationally, it's not looking too good for Musk.
I'm not sure they care. I am not sure they care. They have no shame. Musk is not up to be elected for anything, so his public approval doesn't mean much at all. And I do think in the long run, he thinks he'll benefit economically. But he's enjoying himself. He's loving this. He is exercising the kind of unchecked, untrammeled power that we've never seen before in, some 230 years of U.S. history. The closest analog is the Iran-Contra scandal under Ronald Reagan, when William Casey, the CIA director, in effect created a government within a government, Project Democracy, to conduct operations without any oversight from anyone. But that was caught, in the scandal. And, while it did a few awful things, it was stopped. But there seems to be nothing to stop Musk. He's exercising vastly more powerful as, a single person government within the government, far beyond anything that the Iran-Contra scandalers had imagined.
Allan Lichtman, thank you so much for joining me on the Trump Report today.
Thank you. That was an outstanding interview. I really appreciate it.